Last year, I harvested over 300 pounds of vegetables from a garden that cost me exactly $0 to plant, $0 to feed, and $0 to maintain. Not a single trip to the garden center. Not one bag of fertilizer, not one packet of seeds purchased, not $1 spent on soil amendments. 300 pounds of food, and the only investment was time and knowledge. Now, I know how that sounds. For most of my gardening life, I figured a productive garden required a productive wallet. Every spring, I'd walk into the garden center and walk out $200 lighter. Bags of potting mix, boxes of fertilizer, seed packets, transplants, mulch, pest sprays. The list never ended, and every year the bill seemed to grow right alongside the garden. But about 6 years ago, I spent a long weekend visiting a family in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. They had a garden that put mine to shame. Bigger yields, healthier plants, more variety, and when I asked what they spent on it each season, the answer was nothing. They looked at me like it was a strange question. Everything they needed came from the land itself or from the community around them. That visit completely rewired how I think about growing food, and today I'm going to walk you through exactly how you can build a garden that sustains itself without spending a dime. And stick with me to the end because I'll share a technique I learned from an Amish grandmother for starting seeds that most gardeners have never even considered, and it works remarkably well. I'll be honest with you, for over 20 years I operated on the assumption that good gardening meant good spending. Better fertilizer, better results, fancier seed varieties, better harvest. I bought raised bed soil every spring. I bought vermiculite and perlite and fish emulsion and bone meal. I bought seedlings from the nursery because growing from seed seemed like too much trouble, and I bought new seeds every single year because I never thought to save the ones I already had. If you've been doing the same thing, you're not alone. I was right there with you, season after season, reaching for my wallet before I reached for my shovel. Then I watched that Amish family operate their garden over the course of a full weekend, and I realized the problem wasn't my garden. It was my dependency on purchased inputs. Everything I was buying, they were making, saving, or sourcing for free, and their results were better than mine. Here's something I came to understand during that visit and in the years since. In Amish communities, especially the larger settlements in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, there is a deeply practical reason behind their self-sufficiency. These are large families, 8, 10, 12 people sitting down at every meal. Every square foot of garden has to pull its weight, and there is no budget for waste or unnecessary spending. They operate under a concept called aufgeva, which roughly translates to making do with what you have. It's not romantic or philosophical. It's survival math. When you're feeding that many mouths from a quarter acre of garden, you learn very quickly how to close every loop. Seeds come from last year's plants. Fertility comes from the animals. Soil improvements come from compost they build themselves. Nothing is purchased that can be produced at home. And the result is a garden that runs on its own momentum, year after year, getting more productive over time rather than more expensive. That's exactly what I'm going to show you how to build. The first thing you need to understand is that a zero-cost garden starts with your soil, and the way you build that soil without spending money is composting, but not the way most of us think about composting. I used to buy compost. I'd load bags of it into my truck every April. Meanwhile, I was throwing away everything I needed to make my own. The Amish compost relentlessly, every kitchen scrap, every fallen leaf. Every bit of animal bedding, every weed pulled from the garden goes back into the cycle. Here's exactly how to set this up for free. Choose a spot at least 4 feet by 4 feet, ideally 6 feet by 6 feet if you have the space. You don't need a bin. A simple pile on bare ground works fine, and that's exactly what most Amish families use. Start with a layer of brown material about 4 to 6 inches deep. This means dried leaves, cardboard torn into pieces with any tape or labels removed, straw or dry grass clippings. On top of that, add 2 to 3 inches of green material, kitchen scraps like vegetable peels, fruit cores, coffee grounds, and eggshells, fresh grass clippings, garden trimmings, pulled weeds that haven't gone to seed. Then add another brown layer on top. Keep alternating like this as material becomes available. The science behind why this works is straightforward. Brown materials are carbon-rich. Green materials are nitrogen-rich. When you combine them in roughly a 3-to-1 ratio browns to greens by volume. You create the ideal environment for thermophilic bacteria to break everything down into humus, which is the dark, crumbly, nutrient-dense material that feeds your soil biology. Turn the pile with a garden fork every 2 to 3 weeks to introduce oxygen, which keeps the aerobic bacteria active and prevents the pile from turning slimy and foul-smelling. In zones 7 through 9, a well-managed pile can produce usable compost in as little as 8 to 10 weeks during the warm months. In zones 3 through 5, plan on 12 to 16 weeks, or start your pile in late summer so it's ready by spring. The visual cue you're looking for is material that's dark brown, crumbles easily in your hand, smells earthy like a forest floor, and no longer resembles any of the original ingredients. I went from buying 6 to 8 bags of compost every spring to producing all I need from materials I already had. The only change was paying attention to what I was throwing away. Now that your fertility source is covered, here's where most people hit a wall: seeds. Every year, gardeners spend $50, $70, sometimes over $100 on seed packets. The Amish spend nothing because they save seeds from their own plants season after season, generation after generation. And this is easier than you think once you understand a few basics. Here's what you need to know. Start with open pollinated varieties, not hybrids. This is critical. Hybrid seeds, the ones labeled F1 on the packet, will not produce true-to-type offspring. Open pollinated and heirloom varieties will give you seeds that grow into plants identical to the parent. For tomatoes, let 2 or 3 of your best fruits ripen fully on the vine until they're almost overripe. Cut them open, scoop the seeds and gel into a small jar, add an inch of water, and let it sit at room temperature for 3 to 4 days. You'll see a layer of mold form on top. That's fermentation, and it's actually removing the germination inhibiting coating from the seeds. After 3 to 4 days, rinse the seeds in a fine mesh strainer, spread them on a paper plate, and let them dry completely for about a week. Store them in a paper envelope, not plastic, in a cool, dry place. They'll stay viable for 4 to 6 years. For beans and peas, it's even simpler. Let the pods dry completely on the plant until they're brown and papery. Pick them, shell the dried seeds out, and store them. For peppers, let a few fruits ripen past eating stage until the skin starts to wrinkle. Cut them open, scrape out the seeds, dry them on a plate for a week, and store them. The Amish families I've spent time with typically save seeds from 8 to 12 different crops every year. Tomatoes, peppers, beans, peas, squash, cucumbers, lettuce, dill, basil, and marigolds. That covers the backbone of most gardens. One important note: squash, cucumbers, and melons cross-pollinate easily. So if you're growing multiple varieties of the same species close together, the saved seeds may not come true. The Amish handle this by growing only one variety of each species per season, or by hand pollinating and tying the blossoms closed with a strip of cloth. If you're just starting with seed saving, begin with tomatoes, beans, and peppers. Those are the most forgiving and will save you the most money right away. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, and you want more of these deep dives into how traditional methods can transform your garden, take a second and hit subscribe. I've got a whole series of these coming, and I think you'll find real value in what's ahead. All right, let's keep going. Now here's where the garden starts feeding itself in a way that really surprised me. Fertility, without purchasing anything. You've got your compost, but the Amish use several other free fertility strategies that most modern gardeners completely overlook. The first is cover, cropping, and it costs nothing if you save the seed. In early fall, after your summer crops are finished, broadcast crimson clover or winter rye across your empty beds. Crimson clover is a legume, which means it partners with rhizobium bacteria in the soil to fix atmospheric nitrogen directly into the root zone. When you cut it down in spring about 3 to 4 weeks before your planting date and turn it into the top few inches of soil, all that nitrogen becomes available to your next crop. Winter rye, on the other hand, produces massive root systems that break up compacted soil and add organic matter when turned under. The Amish rotate between the two depending on what they're planting next. Clover before heavy feeding crops like tomatoes and corn, rye before root crops like carrots and potatoes that benefit from loose, well-structured soil. You can save crimson clover seed by letting a small patch flower and go to seed in spring before you turn the rest under. Same with rye. Let a few square feet mature fully, harvest the seed heads, thresh them by rubbing between your hands, and store the seed for fall planting. Free fertility, year after year, on a closed loop. The second free fertility method is what I call the leaf bank. Every fall, leaves are everywhere for free. Most of your neighbors are bagging them and putting them on the curb. Collect as many as you can. Shred them with a lawnmower if possible, which speeds decomposition dramatically. Spread a layer 4 to 6 inches deep over your garden beds in late fall. By spring, earthworms and soil microbes will have pulled much of that material down into the soil, improving structure, moisture retention, and nutrient availability. In my garden, I collect between 15 and 20 bags of leaves from neighbors every October. They're happy to have someone take them. I'm happy to have free mulch and soil amendment. The Amish have been doing this for as long as there have been trees in gardens. Here's the third fertility strategy, and it's the one that ties everything together. Rotation. The Amish don't plant the same crop in the same spot twice in a row. They rotate on a 3 to 4 year cycle. Heavy feeders like tomatoes, squash, and corn go into freshly composted beds. The following year, those beds get legumes like beans and peas, which replenish nitrogen. The third year, light feeders like root vegetables and herbs go in. The fourth year, the bed rests under cover crop or gets a heavy dose of compost and the cycle starts again. This rotation does more than manage fertility. It breaks pest and disease cycles. Tomato blight spores that overwinter in the soil can infect your beans the next year. Colorado potato beetles that emerge expecting potatoes find lettuce instead. The Amish figured out through centuries of observation what agricultural science now confirms. Rotation is the single most effective free tool for maintaining both soil health and crop productivity. If you're in zones 3 through 5, where the growing season is short, you can still cover crop effectively by choosing fast-establishing varieties like field peas or oats that can be planted in late August and turned under in May. In zones 8 through 9, you might get 2 cover crop cycles per year, one in summer with buckwheat and one in winter with crimson clover, doubling your free nitrogen input. The next piece of building a zero-cost garden is free water management, and this one is so obvious that I overlooked it for years. Rainwater. A single inch of rain falling on a 1,000-square-foot roof produces approximately 600 gallons of water. Most Amish households collect rainwater in simple barrel systems positioned under the roof downspouts. You can set up a basic rain barrel for free using a food-grade barrel. Check with local restaurants, car washes, or food processing businesses. Many give these away. Position it under a downspout, cut a hole in the lid to accept the water flow, attach a spigot near the bottom using a basic brass fitting, and elevate the barrel on cinder blocks so gravity feeds your watering can or a short hose. One 55-gallon barrel will water a small garden through a dry week. 2 or 3 barrels, connected in series with overflow hoses between them, can sustain a larger plot. The visual cue for when to water is simple. Push your finger 2 inches into the soil. If it's dry at that depth, water. If it's moist, wait. The Amish don't water on a schedule. They water based on observation, and here's a detail that matters. Water in the early morning before 7 if you can manage it. This gives foliage time to dry before evening, which dramatically reduces fungal disease pressure. Watering in the evening is one of the most common mistakes I see, and I made it myself for a long time. Now for the final piece of the puzzle. Getting free plants and expanding your garden without buying a single transplant. The Amish are masters of propagation, and 3 techniques in particular will change how you think about plant acquisition. First, division. Many perennial herbs and plants can be divided for free every spring. A single clump of chives can be split into 4 or 5 new plants. Rhubarb crowns can be divided every 3 to 4 years. Oregano, thyme, and mint spread aggressively and can be divided annually. Dig up the clump, pull or cut it apart so each piece has roots and top growth, and replant immediately. Water well and they'll establish within 2 weeks. Second, cuttings. Tomato suckers, those side shoots that grow in the joint between the main stem and a branch, can be pinched off and rooted in a jar of water in about 7 to 10 days. Once roots are an inch long, plant them in the garden. One healthy tomato plant can produce 6 to 8 free new plants over the course of a season through sucker propagation. Basil, rosemary, sage, and mint all root easily from cuttings as well. Cut a 4 to 6 inch stem just below a leaf node, strip the lower leaves, and place it in water. Change the water every 2 days. Third, community exchange. In Amish settlements, plant and seed sharing is just part of life. Nothing is hoarded. If one family has an abundance of tomato starts, they share with neighbors who had a poor germination year. You can replicate this in your own community. Offer extra seedlings on a neighborhood message board, organize an informal seed swap at your local library or church. Every gardener I know has more of something than they need and not enough of something else. Trading solves both problems at zero cost. Let me share some patterns I've noticed over the years, habits that keep gardeners spending money they don't need to spend. The first pattern is buying new seeds every single year. Most gardeners treat seed packets like they expire immediately. The truth is, properly stored seeds remain viable for years. Tomato seeds last 4 to 6 years. Bean seeds last 3 to 4 years. Pepper seeds last 2 to 3 years. And if you learn to save your own, you never need to buy them again. I bought seeds every spring for 20 years before I realized I was literally throwing away viable seed at the end of every growing season. The second pattern is buying fertility instead of building it. Bagged compost, bottled fertilizer, boxed amendments. These all have free equivalents that are often superior. Homemade compost is more biologically diverse than anything in a bag. Cover crops provide nitrogen for free. Leaf mulch improves soil structure better than most purchased amendments. The Amish build fertility from what's already on hand because they have to. It works better because living systems outperform manufactured inputs. The third pattern is replacing instead of propagating. When a plant dies or when you want more of something, the default modern response is to buy another one. The Amish default is to propagate, divide, save seed, or trade. A single purchase of one open-pollinated tomato variety can supply you and your neighbors with plants indefinitely if you save the seed. The fourth pattern is treating water as a utility rather than a resource to harvest. Municipal water or well pump electricity costs money. Rain is free. It falls on your roof whether you capture it or not. The only question is whether you direct it into a barrel or let it run into the storm drain. Now, here's that technique I promised you at the beginning, the one I learned from an Amish grandmother in Lancaster County that I've never seen in any gardening publication. She started her seeds every spring in eggshell halves. Not egg cartons, not peat pots, not plastic cell trays. Actual eggshells saved over the winter. Here's exactly how she did it. When cracking eggs for cooking, she cracked them roughly in half and rinsed out the inside. She poked a tiny drainage hole in the bottom of each half shell using a sewing needle. She set the shells back into the egg carton for stability and filled each one with a pinch of fine compost from her own pile. 1 seed per shell, pressed about 1/4 inch deep, watered gently with a teaspoon. She kept the cartons on a south-facing windowsill. The shells held moisture well, provided a small amount of calcium to the seedling roots, and when it was time to transplant, she simply squeezed the shell gently to crack it further and planted the whole thing directly in the garden. The shell decomposed in the soil within a few weeks, releasing calcium right into the root zone as it broke down. I started doing this 4 winters ago, and I've never gone back to buying seed starting supplies. I save eggshells all winter, fill them with my own compost, plant my own saved seeds, and by spring I have dozens of healthy transplants ready for the garden. Total cost, 0. Total waste, 0. The seedlings are actually more vigorous than what I used to get from plastic cell trays because the calcium from the shell gives them a strong start, and there's no transplant shock from removing them from a container since the container goes into the ground with them. One practical detail. This works best for small to medium-seeded crops like tomatoes, peppers, herbs, lettuce, and flowers. Larger seeded crops like squash and beans are better direct sown since they outgrow the eggshell too quickly. And if you're in zones 3 through 5 where you're starting seeds indoors 8 to 10 weeks before last frost, save eggshells from October through February so you have plenty by the time you need them. That's the whole system. Build your own compost from materials you already have. Save seeds from your own plants year after year. Use cover crops and leaf mulch for free fertility. Collect rainwater instead of paying for irrigation. Propagate and trade instead of buying. And start your seeds in eggshells from your own kitchen. None of this requires special equipment, special knowledge, or special spending. It requires paying attention to what you already have and closing the loops that the Amish closed generations ago out of pure practical necessity. These families didn't build self-sustaining gardens because it was trendy or environmentally virtuous. They did it because they had 12 mouths to feed and no budget for the garden center. That constraint forced an elegance of approach that most of us have never been pushed to discover. If any of this shifted how you think about what a garden actually needs, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Tell me which of these you're going to try first, or if you've been doing something similar, share what's worked for you. And if you want more of these practical deep dives into traditional growing methods that actually hold up under scrutiny, hit subscribe. I've got a lot more of these ahead. Thanks for your time today. Go take a look at what you've been throwing away, and I think you'll find your garden has been waiting for it all along. I'll see you in the next one.